This is Paul Morphy. He was likely one of the best chess players ever lived. However, there's a chance you may have never heard of him. So today, I have prepared 3 instructive and brilliant games played by him. But before we dive into that, let's have a short history lesson. Paul Morphy was a chess prodigy from New Orleans, born in 1837. He started learning chess as a child and quickly displayed remarkable talent. By the age of 12, he had defeated the strongest players in the US. And in 1857, he won the first American Chess Congress. Morphy's brilliant attacking style, rapid calculations, and ability to foresee combinations made him a legend. After returning from his travels in Europe in 1858, he felt there were no worthy opponents left. As a result, he retired from competitive play, leaving behind a legacy as one of the greatest chess minds in history, and essentially quitting chess forever, at just 22 years old. The first game was played in New Orleans in 1850, when Paul was 13 years old. He played against his father, Alonzo Morphy, who was considered a decent chess player at the time. But like in many of his other games, he played without a rook, giving his father a significant advantage. So let's start with the game. Morphy opens with e4, to which Alonzo replies with e5, followed by both players bringing their knights out. And with Paul developing his bishop to c4, this leads to the Italian game, a classic opening that is still played to this day. Alonzo brings out his other knight, allowing white to move his knight to g5, threatening a fork on the f7 square. Black plays d5, followed by white playing e takes d5. Typically, one of the first traps beginners learn is the so-called fried liver attack, but back in the day, not everyone was aware of it. That's why Alonzo captures on d5, which is already a mistake. It allows Paul to sacrifice his knight on f7, followed by queen to f3, which gives check and attacks the knight. The only way to hold on to the knight is by moving your king directly to the center. White plays knight c3, putting pressure on the pinned piece, and Alonzo gives up the knight, with knight d4. Paul wins the knight, but objectively speaking, black is still much better due to the fact that Paul is playing without a rook. White plays queen to f7, controlling important squares around the king, and threatening knight to e4, checkmate in 1. Alonzo meets this threat with bishop to e6. What Alonzo probably didn't see is that it allows his son this insane sequence of moves, the first one being, bishop takes e6. The knight recaptures, and Paul plays his knight to e4, capitalizing on the fact that the king still has to guard the knight and cannot return to safety because the white queen controls those squares. The young Paul finds another strong follow-up move with c4 check. This leads to a knight trade, which Alonzo probably thought would benefit him because when you're ahead in material, you should always trade pieces. Black plays his queen to d4, which is the final error. This leads to one of the most spectacular checkmates ever achieved. The first move is queen to g4, which forces the king to d3, followed by a check on e2, the king goes to c2. Paul plays d2, giving a discovered check, and black takes the bishop on c1. White to move, mate in 1, can you find it? Paul short castles, this is checkmate. The second game was played in 1858 in an opera house in Paris. Morphy's opponents were the German Duke Karl of Brunswick and the French aristocrat Count Isoire de Vauvenargues. The game was played in a small room during the opera The Barber of Seville, which is why it became known as the opera game. It is also regarded as the most famous chess game ever played. The game is often used by chess instructors to teach the importance of piece development, the value of sacrifices in mating combinations, and other concepts. So this might be a really instructive game for you. Let's dive in. Morphy opens with e4, and the 2 amateur players respond with e5. Knight to f3, and d6. This is the Philidor defense, a quite passive opening. Morphy strikes directly in the center with d4. And black develops the bishop to g4, pinning the knight to the queen. As Fischer already said, this is a weak move already. And surprisingly he is right. It allows Morphy to take on e5, followed by black taking on f3. And queen takes f3. Now, Paul plays his bishop to c4, threatening checkmate on f7. Black meets this threat with knight to f6. It looks like a normal move, right? This is a mistake, because it allows white a fork. With queen to b3, targeting both the f7 and b7 square. The amateurs defend with queen to e7, but this leaves the b7 pawn hanging. But Morphy wanted more than just a pawn, so he played knight to c3, maintaining the threat of capturing the pawn. c6 defends the pawn and prepares the b5 push. White develops his bishop to g5, pinning the knight to the queen. The move b5 is an inaccuracy, because it allows white a brilliant sacrifice. Can you find it? The correct move is knight takes b5, followed by bishop takes b5 giving check. Black blocks the check with his knight. White can add even more pressure, with long castle. The pinned knight is attacked twice by the bishop and the rook, so black has to make the awkward move, rook d8. Look at this position. Even though Morphy is down material, almost all of his pieces are in the attack, while every piece of black is tied down to defense. White sacrifices the rook on d7, giving up more material once again. The idea is to bring his last piece into the attack with rook d1. Black's pinned rook is attacked twice, so black adds more defense by moving the queen to e6, getting out of the pin. Morphy takes the rook, with check. And the knight recaptures. Now can you see this insane mate in 2 moves? It starts with queen to b8, sacrificing the queen. Knight takes. And rook d8 is checkmate. Morphy delivers checkmate with his last 2 pieces. This is truly beautiful. In the last game, our protagonist Morphy played against an unknown opponent in 1859 in Paris. e4 e5. Knight f3, knight c6. Bishop c4, once again the Italian game. Black responds again with knight to f6. However, in this game, Morphy does not play knight to g4, instead, he strikes in the center with d4. Black captures the pawn, and white simply castles. Black takes another pawn with his knight, which allows Morphy to play rook e1, pinning the knight to the king. Black responds to this threat with d5, counterattacking the bishop while also defending his knight. Morphy finds a good move, bishop takes d5. After the queen recaptures, he can play knight to c3, capitalizing on the pinned pieces. The queen moves away, and after Paul takes the knight, he is threatening a discovered check with the knight. Black blocks this with developing his bishop to e6, getting ready to castle. Morphy swings his knight to g5, where it has many dangerous possibilities. Black develops his dark squared bishop to b4, attacking the rook. Paul sacrifices the rook, knowing that after the pawn recaptures, he will have a highly active knight that has many different targets. It seems like black covers everything with queen to f7, but Morphy finds a strong move, knight to g5. After the queen moves away, white plays the silent queen e2. Black's bishop to d6 is the final mistake. Morphy starts with a check on g7 and the king moves to d7. Queen g4 check. The king is forced to d8, to which Morphy follows up with knight f7, giving up the knight. Just a check with his bishop. After the bishop blocks, he continues with knight e6 check. After king c8, can you see how white can win? The correct move is knight to c5, delivering a discovered check. The king moves to b8, after which Morphy plays knight to d7, checking again. The black king is forced to c8, and now comes knight to b6 check, again forcing the king back to b8. Morphy delivers the stunning move queen to c8, sacrificing the queen. After the rook takes, knight to d7 delivers checkmate. After Morphy retired from chess at the age of 22, he grew to hate the game and never played another game of chess again. He died on July 10, 1884, at the age of 47, after taking a cold bath on a hot summer day. A sad story of a young chess genius born in the wrong generation. Rest in peace. Unofficial first world chess champion.